So today is the day with two names, Palm Sunday and Passion Sunday. As a child, I loved this day. I remember fondly being a child, waving the palms as we sang, "All glory, Lord, and honor." And there's something beautiful about these traditions. They bring us back. They invite us to continue to move forward in faith. I remember asking people to help fold the palms into crosses. I could never figure that piece out, but I would always find someone who could do it for me. And I remember when the adults weren't looking, poking my friends with the palms. Maybe you have your own Palm Sunday memories. But as an adult, I came to see this day a little bit differently. It isn't just a celebration, although it is. It's also the beginning of sorrow. We wave palms today, but we know where it's headed. We know the story. We know where it's all going, where the road leads. And today we welcome Jesus with shouts of Hosanna. But in just 5 short days, we'll be part of the crowd that yells, "Crucify him." And I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more I realize I probably would have done the same back then. That maybe this is our story of how quickly we can turn from praise to crucify him. Jesus understood this, I think. He knew what was to happen. He understood that the crowds didn't understand him. I think he understands that the church today still doesn't understand him. And maybe we're just at the beginning of a consciousness that can begin to embrace the gospel message that he came to bring to us. He knew what was coming. He knows what's happening, and yet he comes. He still comes. And he enters on a donkey, not a war horse. Get that through your heart and head. Anybody who says anything differently about Jesus' intentions is not telling you the truth, and they haven't read their Bible. He comes on a donkey, the ancient sign of humility and peace. The people cheer, but we know that they're cheering for the Messiah that they want. They want a king. They want a conqueror. They want a liberator. They want a quick fix. They want David, who will judge the nations and all of their enemies and will baptize them with a sense that they are right and all their enemies are wrong. They want control. They want power. That's what we want. He doesn't bring that. He doesn't give that. He brings compassion. And he offers peace. I think the place that Jesus is calling to is a paradox. I think it's best understood through poetic and paradoxical words. David White, the poet, calls this place robust vulnerability. Live with that phrase for a while. Or what the Apostle Paul calls power made perfect in weakness. A power that empties itself and becomes a servant. Or what the poet Rumi calls fierce courtesy. Fierce because it comes again and again and again. And courtesy because we resist it over and over and over again. A love that refuses to force itself on anyone, on you or me, but also refuses to back down and continues to invite and invite and invite over and over again, even the people who misunderstand him again and again. Jesus courageously rides on. His eyes are open. His heart is full. His spirit is willing as the crowd cheers. And here's the thing we have to remember about crowds. This is really important. They're different than community. Crowds feel electric. They carry momentum, but they don't have genuine connection. We need to understand why so many people are being moved to be part of crowds and doing things they would never do on their own, but somehow when you're a part of a group, you forget it and you will do things that are out of character. In a crowd, you can blend in, you can perform, you can stay hidden. But in community, you can't. In community, you take the risk of being known, being seen, being loved in all your imperfection. Community is messy, and our culture doesn't like community, but we need it more than ever. There's a difference between crowds and community. Jesus did not come to feed red meat to the crowd, to feed the frenzy of the crowd. He came to free us from that frenzy. He came to free you and me from having to perform grace on the outside while refusing to be touched by it on the inside. He came to help you live from the true center, the image of God that you are created to be, to help you trust that yes, you're broken, but you're beloved. Yes, you're wounded, but you can be a healer like Jesus. He came to help us encounter one another in our humanity with our humanity. And today we see Jesus' humanity up front and close and personal. He's hurting. He's angry. He's flipping over tables. He's cursing a fig tree. I'll get to that in a moment. These are not the outbursts of a toddler. These are expressions of sacred grief, holy grief. This is anger born of love. This is anger born of caring that things would be better than they are. This is grief transformed into fruitful action. And Jesus is wondering, is any of this bearing fruit? That's why he gets so angry with this fig tree. It's supposed to feed. We, as the people of God, are supposed to feed one another. But we are often so barren. Jesus is heartbroken, not because he's lost control, but because he longs for peace, for wholeness. Francis Weller, in the book that we've been journeying on Tuesday mornings and evenings, writes that grief is not just an emotion, it's a faculty of being human. It's a practice. If we want to be human, we must learn to work with grief. We must recognize that when grief doesn't move through us, we do not bear fruit. We can't bear fruit. We harden up. We calcify. We're incapable of compassion. But if we can trust grief and let it move through us, then we connect to life, to others, to God in a more natural and fruitful way. But we've got to learn to work with it. And I think this week, we see Jesus working creatively with his sorrow, with his anger, with grief, and he stays with it. He stays conscious and present through every stage of this story. He doesn't bypass the grief. He doesn't fast forward. He stays with it and he lets it flow from him. He is apprenticing his grief and he's inviting us to do the same. 2 summers ago, I was on retreat in Ireland, and I spent some time in solitude, but also in a safe and trustworthy community. And while I was there, I read this poem by Francis Lamott, and a couple lines just pierced my heart. And I didn't understand why. These were the words I read that morning. The ancestors want you to know that you're not required to carry their pain. Your grandmothers are singing for you to birth your own unbearable happiness. And I just broke down, cried like a baby, confused as to what it was that touched me. And then for the first time in a while, I thought about my maternal grandmother. I'd heard the story, but that day it just lived a little more deeply into my heart and soul. You see, she was a devout person of faith who grew up in Berlin, loved the Catholic Church, loved the ritual, the sacraments, The Mass, it was so meaningful to her. It touched her heart in a way that I hope the children are touched by the work that we do. But then she made the choice to marry a man who had been divorced. And guess what happened to her? She was excommunicated from the church. And that day, I just grieved that. I was so angry. So angry at what we do in the name of God. And I realized that's my story. I thought it began with a desire to create a more inclusive and loving community. It began with that heartbreak that my grandmother experienced and that has reverberated through our family. And it helped me discover and clarify my call to help create a community that's not obsessed with who's in and who's out, who's right and who's wrong, but a community that takes Jesus seriously and takes the biblical witness to heart, that the Bible is teaching a whole different way of power, a power that comes through the cross. In that moment, I met a God who says, I'm here with you. I'm here with you. And I want to work with you to create something good and beautiful through this pain. I think that's the work for our time. How do we let sorrow, sacred grief, shape us so that we become people of courageous and inclusive love? That day, by the grace of God and by the community that held me, I didn't run from grief, I welcomed it. I realized that I was brokenhearted about something that Jesus was brokenhearted about. It was so clear in the Bible that I was brokenhearted about something that breaks God's heart today. I glimpsed the cross not as punishment, but as a place where God meets me with tender mercy and redemptive love. That's part of the mystery of the cross. That's what we're invited to consider once again for our lives. The cross reveals not only our resistance to grace and the way that we kill each other in body and spirit in the name of God, and we kill and beat up upon ourselves in the name of God, but it also reveals God's refusal to stop loving us over and over and over. The truth is, we resist grace at so many turns. We prefer control. We prefer power. But faith is about surrender. It's about trust. It's about allowing our grief to open up into compassion, to participate in a love that keeps showing up even when we push it away, as we do over and over and over again, as we come up with more important things to do in our lives than remember the love that God has. At Mount St. Helens, after the eruption, scientists assumed that everything was dead and gone, but what they discovered surprised even the scientists. In small protected hollows called refugia, life endured. And in time, these tiny shoots began to emerge out of the ashes, and ferns unfurled. And I think that's what happens when we make space for grace and for grief. New life begins to emerge. I think our heart at its best is called to be refugia. Parker Palmer talks about the difference between a shattered heart and a broken heart. Shattered hearts create bitter people, and bitter people are attracted to crowds. They want to stay hidden. They want to perform. They want permission to do something they would never do on their own. But broken hearts lead us to community. Broken hearts lead us to places of healing and restoration and renewal. And I hope we're becoming that kind of place. A place of refugia in the midst of the ashes of our time. As so much is being burned to the ground, let's be a place of refugia, of strength and renewal, a place where our heart breaks open for wisdom and for justice and for mercy. Let our heartbreak become holy ground, not a place of despair, but a place of expansion. As Francis Weller writes, it may be through our broken hearts that we will fall in love with the world again. It may be through our broken hearts that we will fall in love with the world again. So don't rush past your sorrow. Don't hide from your anger. It's part of your humanity. Be curious about what's breaking your heart. Be curious about what makes you angry. It may lead you to discover that you're a part of a story that you didn't even realize you were a part of. And we're all a part of a story that's greater than all of us. So honor your anger. Stay in touch with your grief. Hold it all in the light and love of Christ. And if you're ready, I hope you are, share it with at least one person who's safe and trustworthy, and better with a small group of people. Let it soften you, not into passivity, but into robust vulnerability. Let it lead you to embody the same fierce courtesy that Jesus demonstrates today and that grace demonstrates all the time. You see, we can be a refugia. That's, I think, what we are at our best as the church. And that's what our mission partners are doing all the time. Right here in Patterson, in our neighborhood, young children are finding a voice and a future through music and mentoring. Right here, a teenager who's struggling in school finds something after school that they've been longing for, a space to dream bigger about their lives. Right here in our neighborhood, a college student returns to serve as a mentor, becoming the kind of adult they longed to have when they were teens. That's New City Kids in a nutshell. Right here in our neighborhood, a grandmother is given not just a hot meal, but human dignity. Right here, a man who's lost everything is being called by his name and being reminded that he is not invisible. Right here in our community, a volunteer who once received soup and bread is on the other side of the table, extending that same soup and bread to somebody who's hungry and doesn't know where the next meal will come from. These are signs of life in the midst of ashes, places of holy resistance and holy repair. This is refugia. This is what we're called to give. This is what we're called to support. This is what we're called to bless the world into becoming. And you and I have opportunities to be about that. And this is what Holy Week is about. This is what leads from the cheers of Palm Sunday to the reverent silence of Holy Saturday. This is what prepares us not only to celebrate the resurrection, but to participate in the mystery of what is rising from the ashes and rising from the tomb. So let's walk this path with faith, with openness. And let's trust the mystery for ourselves so that we might be a little bit more courageous than we are right now. A little more vulnerable than we are right now. A little more humble and a little more compassionate. Amen.